So the Coalition on Human Needs, if you're not familiar with us, we're an alliance of national groups, service providers, faith groups, policy experts, and labor, civil rights, and other advocates. The mission of the coalition is to advocate at the federal level to meet the needs of people with low incomes and increase knowledge of positive outcomes from current or proposed programs. The Partnership for America's Children has over 50 members, multi-issue child advocacy organizations across 40 states. And their mission is to support its network of state and community child advocacy organizations in effective advocacy. So what is the expanded CTC? The expanded CTC came with the American Rescue Plan Act that essentially expanded the CTC for tax year 2021. The expanded CTC is projected to cut the number of children in poverty by about 40%, and also projected to lift approximately 1.1 million children above half the poverty line. And just by knowing more about this credit, you can help families to claim the full benefit. So families were eligible to receive half of the CTC in 2021 and half when they filed their taxes this year, or the full credit if they did not get the advance payments in 2021. And the increase to the CTC was that it went from $2,000 to $3,600 per child age 0 to 5 and $3,000 per child age 6 through 17. There are no minimum income requirements. Families with no earned income are eligible for the entire credit, and the credit is fully refundable, meaning that families are eligible for the full amount even if they don't owe taxes. And this is just an example of how much money is actually on the table for a family. So if we're looking at a family with one adult, a 4-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 15-year-old, in total for 2021, for the 2021 CTC, the family would receive $9,600. The family could also qualify for additional money through stimulus payments or other tax credits. And what is the challenge? So 4 million or more children are at risk of missing out on the CTC payments. This is because their families have no or very low incomes. They're not required to file taxes and may not have filed taxes ever or recently. These families may not have received the 2021 advanced CTC payments automatically, and they're going to miss out on the credit altogether if they do not file taxes this year. And I'll add a caveat to that, where there is also going to be the opening of a non-filer portal after April 18th, and we'll get into that. And that will be a second option if families choose to not file a tax return, that they can still access the CTC after the April 18th deadline. Black and Latino kids were disproportionately already excluded previously from the full CTC benefit, even before it was expanded, and are now more likely to miss out on it even if they are eligible. And trusted community organizations can really help families claim the CTC. And you do not have to be a tax expert to help families. We really want to emphasize that. We're not trying to make anyone a tax expert today, although maybe you are a tax expert or know a lot about taxes and you're on here. But the idea really is to get the correct information out to organizations, individuals who are working in communities and with families who could really use the information to know that this is out there for them to claim. So who is eligible for the 2021 CTC and how do families claim it? So adults may have a social security number or an individual taxpayer ID number to claim the CTC, but children must have a valid social security number, and that social security number must be valid for employment. The dependent must be the adult's child, including adopted, as well as a grandchild or stepchild, a younger sibling, step sibling, half sibling, or their descendant, or a foster child placed by a government agency. The dependent must have lived with the adult in the US for more than half the year, and the dependent could not have provided over half of their own support in 2021. And how do families claim the 2021 CTC? So in 2021, most families automatically received advanced CTC payments of $250 to $300 per child per month from July through December. Families who were not required to file taxes or did not do so in 2019 or in 2020 for other reasons had to take additional steps to receive the advance payments. And this additional step really involved accessing the non-filer portal that was available through the fall of last year to claim the credit. Everyone will need to file a tax return this year to receive the second half or full amount of the 2021 CTC. Again, with the caveat that this does not necessarily apply to people who don't have to file taxes, although if they don't normally have to file taxes up until April 18th and really afterwards, they can file taxes, and we encourage it because there are other credits on the table like the expanded EITC and child independent care credit. But if someone doesn't want to file the tax return, who doesn't normally file a tax return, there will be other options available after the 18th to do so. But for somebody who does normally file tax returns and does need to file a tax return, they will have to complete that tax return or file for an extension by the 18th to claim the second half of the payments that they started receiving in 2021. And families need help understanding why they should file and how to get help filing. And that's why we're here today. So this is the general timeline for this year for tax filing and beyond. So as we know, tax filing season began on January 24th. VITA sites have been opened. Those are the local volunteer income tax assistance sites that can provide free tax assistance to those who qualify. Those have been open since January and will be open through till April 18th. And then depending on where in the country you are and what capacity is available at particular VITA sites, they might continue on after April 18th, or they might close for a little bit and can come back in June. But they are open now to help people file their tax returns. So as I mentioned, people who are required to file a tax return must file the return or request an extension by April 18th. Individuals not required to file taxes can continue to file returns throughout 2022. Even if they don't request an extension without penalty. And we are hoping that sometime in May, the simplified online filing portal will reopen. And that's where individuals not required to file can claim the CTC without filing a full return, and potentially also the third economic stimulus payment. And this portal will be open through the fall of fall of 2022. So when talking about filing taxes and where to go, the first suggestion we have is that you can identify local VITA sites for people by going to getyourrefund.org. This will automatically link to where you can identify and find VITA sites in your local area. We also suggest that once VITA sites are identified, to call the VITA sites before showing up. Different VITA sites have different requirements. They might need appointments. There might be a capacity each day. People might have to get in line by a certain time. So we recommend that anyone working with families make that suggestion or help them to do so. You can also call 211. As you can see, then select an option after choosing your language to find out more information on a VITA site near you. And just so that everyone also knows, for a married couple, both individuals must actually go to the VITA site to complete the return. Through Get Your Refund, which is available in English or in Spanish, individuals can also access free do-it-yourself tax filing services if they fall within the income requirements. They can get free virtual tax filing assistance, including the opportunity to discuss their situation with a tax specialist over the phone. Or they can sign up to be notified when the simplified filing portal opens in May of 2022. And because there are, depending on where you are, VITA sites have different capacity or availability, or might just not be the most accessible thing for families. There are a couple other options for free tax assistance. One is through the AARP Foundation tax aid sites. These also provide free in-person and virtual tax assistance. Their focus is a little bit more on individuals who are over 50 or have low to moderate income. And then there is also the low income taxpayer clinics. And these are specifically to help individuals who have tax disputes with the IRS. A lot of the referrals we give to this or we suggest are maybe individuals who have issues around custody, like grandparents who have kids, but the adult child is actually claiming the credit when the grandparent is the full-time custodial caregiver of the child, things like that. This is the recommendation we give if somebody has those kinds of concerns and wants to figure out how to navigate through and figure out how they can claim the credit themselves. And also, you know, as I mentioned, accessing a VitaSite might not be, not everyone might have access to one. So we know that people will be searching for paid tax preparers. So if families decide to use paid services, we recommend that they be careful that preparers are submitting accurate returns on their behalf. This is a link to from the IRS how to best identify a tax preparer that they can trust and that knows what they're doing, and to kind of what to look out for and the questions to ask to make sure that they're going to the person who's who will best be able to complete the returns for them. And this link will also be available in the toolkit that we share. And once I'm finished, I can pop it in the chat as well. And speaking specifically about mixed status immigrant families, individuals who might have or need to get an ITIN, an individual tax identification number. So for families to claim the CTC, as I mentioned before, dependents must have social security numbers. The parent or the caregiver can have a social security number or an ITIN, an active ITIN. To obtain the ITIN, individuals must submit Form W-7, which is proof of identity, with proof of identity and foreign status documents with the tax returns. And this is typically a two-step process. So they prepare the ITIN application and then file the application with the tax return. The ITIN application has to be filed with the tax return. They can't submit it separately. So if somebody needs to get an ITIN, especially if they want to claim the credit, they will have to have that application completed to submit with their tax documents, especially if the person they go to doesn't complete the W-7 normally, or isn't prepared to do that. We are also suggesting that to avoid having to mail in personal documents with this W-7 form, that individuals can go to IRS taxpayer assistance centers to get their proof of identity and foreign status documents verified. These centers do not prepare tax returns. They don't actually do a lot of one-on-one client interaction, but they will certify the documents. So individuals don't have to send all these documents in with their W-7 and their tax forms. So they can be, you can help them get appointments there or see if there's one of these centers nearby. The centers also don't necessarily complete the Form W-7. So individuals might already have to come in with that form completed. But like I said, they will verify that they will verify all of these documents. So families don't have to be without the documents for extended period of time while they wait for their ITINs to be approved. And this is a link to the required documents to file taxes. This will also be in our toolkit that we'll share out and we'll talk about in a little bit, so that individuals can know exactly what they need to bring and be prepared for their appointments. And we also want to speak briefly about IRS letter 6419. These were letters that were sent out regarding the advanced CTC payments that went out last year. So the IRS sent everyone a 6419 letter showing how much they had received for the CTC. So these letters show how much the IRS thinks they received or a family received in the child tax credit, and could be incorrect. One of the reasons for this, there could be various reasons for them being incorrect, but one of the reasons can be that, say, for example, the IRS mailed a check to a family, but the family may have moved, didn't receive the check, and the IRS hasn't updated their records showing the return check. They also sent 2 letters. The IRS also sent 2 letters to both members of married couples with half of the amount received. So each couple got a letter saying they received the advanced CTC payments, but the letters only show the half of the total amount that they would have received as a couple. These are not duplicate letters, and both letters should be used when filing tax returns. And if anyone thinks that the amount listed on the letter does not match what the family actually received in advanced CTC payments, we also recommend that they check their IRS online account, and the link is there. And this can give a more up-to-date amount, and that amount can be used when filing the tax returns. So now we'll talk a little bit about barriers and concerns that have come up and how our toolkit addresses them, and just go over some of the commonly asked questions that people have. So in the fall of this past fall, fall 2021, we conducted a series of focus groups with individuals, and these were some of the common concerns and questions that they had regarding the CTC. And we wanted to share them with you, especially because a lot of these are addressed in our toolkit. A lot of these might come up as you're dealing with families and individuals. So families responded well to language emphasizing the help the CTC provided for the family as a whole. They did not respond well to findings about long-term benefits to children. They were cautious about overpromising. So some of these long-term benefits were more of what was mentioned earlier in the presentation, things like cutting child poverty in half, that sort of stuff. Families were more interested in the ability of the child tax credit to help support the growing costs of raising a family and kids and expenses that come along with that. A lot of individuals did not realize that the CTC was expanded, and that people who weren't eligible in the past now are. There was a belief that they had to work to get the credit. There were fears around having to pay the IRS back if they weren't entitled to the credit, fear that because they owed back taxes, fear that they would lose other benefits like SNAP. There were immigration concerns, language barriers, access concerns. There were questions around claiming a child born in 2021. So this was because last year, if someone went through the portal because they didn't get the payments automatically, and they had a child in 2021, the child actually couldn't be claimed through the portal, even though now in 2022, that child can be claimed either through a tax return or later on this year when the portal opens back up. People just talked about having difficulty getting through to the IRS if they had a question. And there was also a general desire for in-person help. Okay, so addressing some of these questions and concerns. The first one being, does receiving the CTC impact other public benefits? And the answer to that is getting this credit will not change any federally funded public benefits that a family receives, like Social Security, SNAP, child care subsidies, or WIC. Will an individual ever have to pay this money back? So the CTC is not a loan. If someone receives a payment for a child who is no longer their dependent, they may have to pay that money back. But there are some protections for those with incomes below 40,000 or 50,000 for heads of households, 60,000 for married couples, and more limited protections for those with incomes below 80,000. This is individuals or non-custodial parents, 100,000 for single head of household, or 120,000 for couples filing jointly. What if someone has not filed tax returns in recent years? So people with very low incomes under 18,800 for a head of household or 25,100 for married filing jointly are generally not required to file. Even if they were required to file, generally there isn't a penalty if the IRS owes someone a refund, perhaps from the EITC, for example. And taxpayers can actually file for the past 3 years, receive the refunds they are owed. So they can actually go back 3 years and file taxes where they might not have in the past. And even if someone owes child support or taxes, they can benefit from claiming the CTC. So the credit will go towards paying off the outstanding child support or the taxes first, and they'll receive any amount left over. If it all ends up going towards what is owed, that reduces their debt, and it can mean that they will be able to get tax credit in future years. Will receiving the CTC affect someone's immigration status or ability to get a green card? The answer to that is no. Under current law, receiving the child tax credit or other tax credits will not affect their immigration status, their ability to get a green card, or their future immigration plans. So use of tax credits is not considered in a public charge determination by U.S. Citizenship and Immigration. Will the IRS share someone's immigration status with other government agencies? The answer to that is no. The IRS is forbidden to share an individual's tax information with other agencies. There are limited exceptions related to certain criminal investigations or to determine someone's tax liability. In those cases, if that was to ever come up, our recommendation is that you refer someone to a tax or immigration law expert to help them with their particular case. And our toolkit, as I mentioned before, especially our FAQ, addresses these common concerns and more. That's a link to it. We'll share it with you as well. And that will also be in the follow-up email that we send out with all of these resources. So you'll have access to everything that's in there. It's a living, breathing document. We are updating it as often as any new information comes in, so that everything is up to date and you can basically have it ready to go to assist people with claiming the credit. Okay, and now we want to speak a little bit about CTC outreach, what works, what we find is helpful, what we have suggestions on, and what kinds of things are in our toolkit that can make any sort of outreach effort that you're interested in a little bit easier to navigate. So when it comes to CTC outreach, what works? What we found, these are lessons from our own work and the work of other partners working on this outreach. First is that when outreach is integrated into existing programs and communications, it can be very effective. Also, families receiving multilingual information multiple times can work very well. Outreach must also include clear referral info with different options for how people can ask questions or get tax prep assistance. So it's not just enough to tell people about the tax credit, especially when you're not a tax expert yourself, but the ability to also give them a next step, tell them where to go and where to find answers can also be really helpful. And broad communication is most effective when paired with targeted outreach or follow-up. So communication with high volumes of families while also connecting more deeply with those at risk of missing out on the CTC. And school districts and government benefit agencies are among the most trusted sources of information for families. Text messages, for example, from schools or agencies have been especially effective, although robocalls, emails, and mailers can also be effective. In addition to hearing from trusted community messengers, families may need to hear from tax, immigration, or family law experts as well. And we've identified essentially two different levels of effective outreach. The first level is outreach. The first level is raising awareness, so broad awareness campaigns reaching large numbers of people. And the second is deeper engagement with families, that more on the ground, one-to-one kind of relationships that are built out of trust, and that families can then take the messages that come through awareness campaigns and have somebody to talk to specifically about. So here are some different options on how you can connect families to the CTC. Examples of level 1 outreach activities. Here we have sending mass text messages, robocalls, and or emails. So as mentioned before, texts have proven to be especially effective, but it's helpful to communicate to families through a combination of methods. These are two different sample texts from the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities. One is a sample text, one is a sample voice message. Both of these can be found in our toolkit as well. This is through their toolkit, but it's linked within our toolkit, and all of this messaging is available in there to access. Recording a phone hold message or video message for waiting room office screens, if that's something that's already going on, replacing it with a message about the CTC can also be helpful. And again, this is another sample script from the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities. Hanging posters in waiting rooms and other public spaces, distributing flyers, sending home flyers and backpacks. We know that a lot of organizations, a lot of people already engage in this as well. So we have these two different sample flyers. One is from GMMB, the other flyer is from CBPP. Both of these available in Toolkit to access and to distribute out to families to share information on. Adding CTC related questions to existing intake forms can be really helpful. So provide intake workers also with local VITA numbers or flyers to provide to families who may be eligible. So again, screening individuals, but also then taking that next step to let families know where to go to next. Adding flyers and FAQs to resources that are already going out to families can also be really helpful. And this is actually a partial screenshot of the FAQ that we've put together, and it's also available in our toolkit. And where partners have relationships with state and local benefit agencies or school districts, where it's possible, we encourage them to send out, or you can encourage them to send out mass communications to beneficiaries and families. We have been doing a series of school outreach resources and info sessions. The link is there for that. We have one more coming up this Friday and next Tuesday, I believe. If anyone's interested in attending those, you can click on the link and register. As well, we also have a public agency toolkit. So we have a provider partner toolkit that we'll be sharing with you, but we, in addition, have also put together a toolkit that's a little more tailored for public agency work. And another level 1 outreach activity can be to send out a message in a regular newsletter or a post on social media if organizations are already engaging in this. We have these as well available in our toolkit to access and ready to use to be able to send out messages. Okay, and then speaking of level 2 outreach activities, what can those look like? So examples of that can be holding a phone bank or conducting peer-to-peer texting, hosting a Q&A with a tax specialist, immigration attorney, or other subject matter expert. Also helping families to schedule VITA appointments. Again, that's kind of talking about that soft referral idea of if you have the information about the CTC, you can also help families to know where to go next. Having that VITA information and being able to help families schedule or tell families how to schedule appointments can be really helpful to help them continue in the process. Where possible, working in collaboration with local tax sites and partners to make tax prep services accessible. And organizing tax filing or document preparation events. So this can look like working with VITA volunteers, local universities, and or other tax specialist volunteers to host tax prep events, or to help families prepare necessary documents before VITA appointments. And this is a list of some of the things you'll find in the toolkit. It's an exhaustive list, but many of the things we've talked about are here. So as I mentioned, flyers and posters, messaging and press materials, FAQ for service providers, social media toolkit. We have resources for immigrant families. We have also recently added a section on foster youth and specific questions regarding those needs. We have a report on lessons learned about benefit agency and school outreach, findings from our focus group with non-filers and service providers, and resources for tracking outcomes. And if you're interested, you can sign up for our child tax credit email list. This is an email list we use to send out anytime we have any new presentations coming up, new resources, new information. As we get closer to the April 18th deadline, we'll have a lot more information coming out on the next steps and other presentations and information that will be available to help people moving forward beyond that deadline, and also about when the non-filer portal opens and when it'll be available. If you're also interested, Get Your Refund does provide for you to get a unique URL. So you can, if you're interested in tracking yours or your organization's activities on that site, you can have that set up. If you're interested in that, you can send me an email and I will help you request that so you can have your own URL. And we'll open up to Q&A now. Before we actually get to Q&A, I'm going to pop in a poll that we have. If people could just take a second to answer these two questions around what your organization is currently doing and what materials you're most likely to use or have you already been using in your work. That's open right now. So we'll just take a minute if you could go through and answer those questions, and then we'll head over to Q&A. Okay, I'll just give it one more minute with the poll. Okay, great. So let me take a look at what we have over here on the Q&A. So from Jim, can you speak to kin families, informal, pending DSF custody case, or kin caring for child yet not confirmed through a court process, informal legal custody with children who would be eligible, and what extra steps might kin families need to do? So if I know Julia just popped something in that that I think also pertains to that. Deb, you're on. Maybe you know a little bit more about the kin, this question in particular.
I just joined, so give me the question.
Okay. So can you speak to kin families? I'm assuming it's KIN families, informal pending DSF custody case, or kin caring for child yet not confirmed through a court process, informal legal custody with children who would be eligible, and what extra steps might kin families need to do?
Okay, so a kin family who has one of the requisite relationships with the child can claim the child as a child tax credit dependent at any point. And I'm sure Julia went over that, but for example, if the child is their sibling's child or grandchild. So it's a list which Julia, you showed before, right? But for example, if I'm caring for my sister's kid or my sister's grandkid or my own grandchild, or have one of those relationships that is authorized, I never need a formal legal placement. I just need to have that blood relationship and be supporting the child and have them living with me for more than 6 months in the year. It doesn't matter where I am in the legal process. If I'm caring for my neighbor's kid and I don't have the required biological relationship, or if I'm caring for a third cousin and I don't have the required close biological relationship, Then I can claim the child once the formal legal process has been approved. We have never asked if, once it's been approved, I can claim them even if my 6-month period needed to start before that. And if somebody runs into that, we will ask Treasury to answer that question. But if the child's been formally placed with me and by a court and has been living with me for more than 6 months, then I can claim that child. Does
Okay.
that answer the question? Put a comment in the chat if you need more details.
There was a follow-up to it that says, thank you. And the follow-up is, how is kinship documented?
You don't need to document it initially at all. You just claim the child. And if the relationship is questioned, which is typically going to happen if someone else also claimed the child, then the IRS will send you a list of, what they need to see from you to document who in fact has the right to claim the child. But to just claim the child, you just fill out the forms, and we don't actually recommend putting in additional paperwork because the IRS doesn't really have a way to process it unless there's been a contested claim over who gets the child and they move it into a separate process.
Great. Thank you, Deb. Okay. So I saw Julia got through, I think, all the questions that were in the chat. And thank you everyone for answering the polls. We'll give it a few more minutes. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to write them in the chat or put them in the Q&A. Happy to answer anything else. Can you send us this information to us about kinship families? Yeah, we can include it in the follow-up email. Happy to do that.
I believe we put a fact sheet about this in the toolkit itself recently.
Yeah, yes, the foster, was that within the foster youth? Yeah. So yes, so that will be, the toolkit will be linked in the follow-up email. And when you go into the toolkit, you can go into the foster youth section and you'll get that information as well. Okay, great. Okay, great. Well, if there are no other questions, we can close out. But again, all of this information, I know Julia popped all the links into the chat. All of it will also be in the email. If you have any other questions, you please feel free to reach out. As we mentioned, a lot of these questions are answered in our toolkit, in our FAQ, but we know all sorts of different questions can come up, and there can be very individualized situations that perhaps we haven't heard of yet. So we're happy to hear from you and also learn from other things that are going on the ground that could be useful to us and the information we're putting out. So, okay. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you to Diane and Robin for helping us put this together today. And yes, Jim, you'll get a recording for this as well. That will be in the follow-up email. And thank you for joining us, everyone. Have a great afternoon.